And we're back now with the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Carl Levin, who will have a hearing of his own to preside over this week, and CBS News national security correspondent David Martin. General Petraeus, who's going to replace General McChrystal, will be before your committee. Is there any question in your mind as to whether he's going to be confirmed?
None.
I take it you agreed with the president when he said he had no choice but to replace General McChrystal.
I think he made the right decision. It was a very tough decision for him. I know it was something which is difficult for him to do because he had and has respect for General McChrystal, but it was something that he thought needed to be done. And I think generally there was a consensus around here, or near consensus, that it was a fair and appropriate decision for a commander-in-chief to make.
David, I want to just ask you a question. You know, I think, as Senator Levin says, I think there's general agreement that the comments that General McChrystal and his staff made were totally inappropriate and simply cannot be tolerated from someone down in the chain of command. But you are at the Pentagon every day and have been there for years and years and probably have more sources out there than any other single reporter, and I think even people from other networks would agree with my comment on that. While the comments were improper, were you surprised by the sentiments that these military people expressed?
I wasn't, Bob, and I think that's what made this story such an instant firestorm. I think everybody who follows Afghan policy closely immediately recognized those sentiments as authentic. You do not have to go to Afghanistan to hear military officers complain about the civilian leadership, but they do it off the record, and they do not do it in a disrespectful way. I've heard plenty of people complain about the National Security Advisor, Jim Jones, but I've never heard anybody on the record or off the record call him a clown, which is incidentally about the last word I would use to describe Jim Jones. So it really was the tone that cost McChrystal his job and the fact that it got out there. But this is the status of relations between the Pentagon and the White House.
Well, what's the problem?
Well, there's, I think, fundamental doubt on both sides. The White House thinks, or is worried anyway, that the Pentagon is going to suck them in by continually asking for more troops. If we just get another 10,000, we can turn the corner. And the military simply is unsure that the president means it when he says he will do whatever it takes to succeed in Afghanistan.
Well, let me ask you that, Senator Levin, because the president said that the other day when he announced his change in command. He said he has a responsibility to succeed. Do you think he is prepared to do whatever it takes to prevail there?
I do. I think his policy is the right policy. I think General Petraeus, who's the originator of a counterinsurgency policy, where your goal is to protect the population, basically so that the population will turn on the Taliban, not support the Taliban, work with the Afghan National Army, which is so critical here. I think that's the right policy. It was the Petraeus policy. McChrystal supported that policy. Petraeus has said publicly and privately to me that he agrees with both pieces of this policy, which was the additional troops, but also setting a date of July 2011 as a way of showing urgency to the Afghan government that they must take responsibility through their army, mainly for their own security, because the Afghan army is the Taliban's greatest nightmare.
But isn't it that date that is the fundamental question about whether the president is prepared to do whatever it takes? He has defined that as simply the beginning of a transition. But people like the vice president are on record as saying, read my lips, there will be significant withdrawals starting in July 2011. If you take that as the policy, it sounds like there's already a decision that come success or failure, this time next year, the U.S. is getting out.
Well, the president's been very clear. It's the beginning of reductions, but the pace of those reductions has not been determined. Circumstances will determine that. But where the president seems to me is right on target, and I think Petraeus is totally with him on this. I've talked to Petraeus about it. I talked to McChrystal about it. The size and the strength of the Afghan army is critical. The Afghan army is popular in Afghanistan. Our presence is not popular in Afghanistan. And our number one mission, it seems to me, and I think there's very strong support in our military for this, is to get the Afghan army to the point in terms of numbers, equipment, capability, that they can be the primary source of security for Afghanistan. This is what the elders told us when we visited with elders in southern Afghanistan. When I said, "You want us here?" and their answer was, "We want you here just as long as is needed to train the Afghan army and then leave." So that is our principal mission, it seems to me now. And by the way, I hope that we do not have greater operations in Kandahar until we bring up, or the Afghan army brings up, more of their troops. There are not enough Afghan troops. There's only 8,000 or 9,000 in Kandahar. There should be more. There are many more capable of taking on the Taliban and the principal responsibility for security. That's been my number one goal for years now, but I think that is the number one mission.
There are some who say that many in the military are worried about the current policy, which a big part of the President's policy and McChrystal's strategy is to protect the civilian population. Do you think that General Petraeus, will you ask General Petraeus about that? Because some are saying that it's leaving the military with fighting with one hand behind their back, that they need a little more leeway to go after these combatants.
Our military always have the right to protect themselves. And I think General Petraeus' counterinsurgency strategy makes that clear. But he also makes clear that if we want to win this, if we want to succeed, the Afghans have got to succeed. It is their success that we must assist, and protecting that population and being careful in terms of what actions we take against that population that could wound or kill those people in Afghanistan, the innocents, is something that we must avoid. We will ask, to answer your question, General Petraeus about that. There's been some grumbling about it. It's understandable that there's some grumbling.
Senator, is it reasonable to expect General Petraeus to deliver results faster than General McChrystal could?
I think he has a very great capability of bringing people together. He has shown that he's able to bring together our civilian side in Afghanistan. That he's shown that in Iraq when he was able to do that, and he's going to be able, I believe, to do that in Afghanistan as well. I would hope his relationship with our ambassador to Afghanistan is better than was the case with General McChrystal. I hope his relationship with our key State Department person there, Ambassador Holbrooke, will be better than was the case with General McChrystal, which was the source of some of the McChrystal staff grumbling. So yes, I think he can improve that situation.
Should there be changes on the civilian side?
I don't think I'm in a position to conclude that. I don't think that's where General Petraeus is coming from, and so the President has said he's comfortable with that, and that's key.
Let me just ask you quickly, what will be the mood in the Congress if the administration comes to you and says it may not be possible to begin withdrawing those troops on these deadlines that we've outlined here? Will Congress go along with that?
I think it depends on the circumstances at the time. We set deadlines in Iraq 3 times. President Bush set a deadline to remove our troops from the Iraqi cities. President Bush set a deadline to remove all of our troops from Iraq. President Obama had one of 3 deadlines that were set in Iraq. It worked. The only way you get things done is by setting dates, and that date was set by President Obama with the support of the military. Obviously, if the circumstances change down the road and the case is made out that things are different, then the President can change his mind just the way General Petraeus can change his mind. He agrees with the policy now, but could he change his mind? Of course he can, and if he does so, he'll tell the President.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.